Eryn, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about this whole month, postpartum return to exercise.
Because it's the summer season here.
And people, here anyways, the weather literally just got good like yesterday or the day before.
Like that.
Yeah, we went from 7 degrees to 30 degrees.
Yeah.
And so it's always a time where people are like, hey, getting nicer out. I'm going to move my body a little bit more. The days are longer. I just find a lot of people jump back in.
Yeah, and they don't plan for it is what we find. It's like, hey, it got nice and I'm going to go run 10K and see how that feels.
See how that works out.
Postpartum body. Yeah, so we're going to talk today specifically about the first 0 to 6 weeks after delivery. And I think that it's worthwhile to break it down into, kind of very early postpartum and then a little bit later postpartum, because the body is still really recovering from birth, and that's kind of that initial stage. And we get a lot of strong social media messaging and that we should be back into our like pre-pregnancy genes and like get back up and active. And I think that Erin's making a face. That sums up our attitude about that.
Well, I just think how I felt 0 to 6 weeks. I was like just surviving.
Yeah.
And I think the more births I had, I got smarter and smarter about it and realized that you can like be very kind to yourself during this.
She learned fast. She didn't have like 10 births though. Like the more births you had, how many did it take?
2.
Yeah. I think too, I was surprised because I went into birth like as a pelvic floor physio, and I was like, oh, well, I know what to do. And I still found I was lost, like especially my first pregnancy, my first delivery.
Yeah.
Like walking for 2 minutes was incredibly challenging for me.
Yeah.
My first week and a
You're
half.
also sleep interrupted, sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Probably not eating optimally. Like, I know there's some people that have fantastic support, but it's still hard to get calories in, get fluids in.
Yeah.
So like exercise really, in terms of like stresses on your body, and exercise is a stress, and we can talk more about that, but like you're dealing with a lot of other stresses on your body plus trying to heal.
Yeah.
So I think like, in terms of your list of priority, if you have the capacity, absolutely. And I know movement is like mental health for a lot of people, myself included. So we want you to be able to move well and move safely, but also don't feel bad if that's kind of like the last on your list, especially in that acute healing phase.
So what are the recommendations in the first 6 weeks, basically?
So I don't know about you, and we're getting like not off track, but I find that you get discharged and everyone is super concerned about the baby for good reason, but you get home and you're like, oh wow, what do I do for myself?
Mm-hmm.
So my number one tip from 0 to 6 weeks is like, number one, get your bowels back on track and do not get constipated.
Don't get constipated. You've heard us say this a bajillion times, right?
Do not get constipated and get your bowel movements back to your typical bowel movement and bowel schedule.
And then I think my thing that I tell people is just start checking in with your pelvic floor again. So this is why we really advocate to go to pelvic floor physiotherapy before deliveries, because learning how to use your core and pelvic floor before delivery is an easier thing to do. After delivery, if there's been tearing and there's sutures in place, but even just the stretching of the pelvic floor muscles can make it feel like you're not connected to your pelvic floor.
Yeah.
If you've got a good understanding of how to Kegel and lengthen your pelvic floor before that, then at least you can kind of go by muscle memory and try to get that connection again. If not, then get into pelvic floor physio and start learning how to do those maneuvers, like that type of pelvic floor muscle contraction.
And the other thing I tell people is that depending on how you gave birth, the pregnancy itself has impact on the pelvic floor and the core as well. So like from 0 to like 10 days, 2 weeks, it's fairly typical to have some pelvic floor signs and symptoms. So like you might be leaking, you might have difficulty holding back gas, you might feel pelvic heaviness, feelings like there's something in your vagina, pressure, like changes in low back and pelvic feelings, discomfort. Some people feel like they don't have much of a core. But what I always say is that those symptoms should continue to get better. Yeah. They shouldn't appear out of nowhere, and they shouldn't get stagnant, so stay the same or start to get worse as you start to add activities of daily living back into your routine. Yeah. Those are all signs that it's a good time to give us a call, and you don't have to wait till 6 weeks. Like we can often start with some intervention. Like I've seen people as early as day 3. They come right from discharge to connect to here.
You don't have to have an internal exam when you present to us.
Yeah, we can start with like just to Katie's point, just kind of getting that neuromuscular connection going again between the muscles and your brain, right?
Yeah. And the other thing would just be getting back to maybe some walking.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's it. You don't need to rush back to like heavy lifting and.
I feel like we can do another 5 minutes.
Yeah, we could. All right. We will. And so we shall. Okay. Bye-bye.